Hey, welcome back, everybody. This week on the Syndicast, we're welcoming pistol builder and market disruptor Adam Nilson from Atlas Gunworks. But before we start the show, I want to say thanks to all the people that signed up for the download or the meeting. If you're a shooter getting started as an influencer, go to HawkeyeSyndicate.com first 1000 and we'll email you that ebook. And if you're a shooter that has 1,000 followers and wants to know what to do next, check out HawkeyeSyndicate.com/influencer and we'll schedule a 1-hour meeting with you. You might end up on the podcast. And if you're a company that's interested in getting getting like an outside look into what your company's up to, check out HawkeyeSyndicate.com/join the syndicate, and we'll schedule a meeting to go over our findings with you and send you actionable next steps for your company. But without further ado, Adam Nilson.
All right, and hey everybody, welcome to the Syndicast. On this episode, I'm really stoked to have Adam Nilson of Atlas Gunworks. Hey, Adam.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, in full disclosure for those that don't know, which would be hard to believe, but that you and I work together, my marketing firm and Atlas Gunworks work together on a lot of these projects.
We do. So, I attribute a lot of our success and growth to the Hawkeye Syndicate.
Oh wow!
And it's probably overdue that we do this podcast.
Yeah, I think so. And I took a break for obvious reasons, and which I've laid out ad nauseum at this point, and I'm really excited to be back into it. And this is definitely one of the first shows I wanted to do, was talking to you about, like, it's been a pretty wicked ride for the last couple of years, brother.
Yeah, for sure. I probably hard to predict what this industry would be like and what the ride would be like, but yeah, it's been fun though, and there's been some tough days, but it's been fun. And what's cool, I think, about our relationship is you and I have set a bunch of goals, and to this point, we've hit every single one of them. So
oh yeah, no, you're my favorite client. You call me up. So most people call me up and they're just like, "We just need more sales." You call me and you say, "I need to grow 17.5%. But if we grow 18, we're all out of a job because we won't be able to handle it." I'm like, oh, great. Thanks. But they're specific.
And we've been lucky. I mean, it's a little bit of luck and a little bit of work, but we've grown at just the perfect pace.
Yeah, we have. It's been great. It's been really great. So, and without too many growing pains out in the world, right? I know we've had some behind the scenes, but we've managed to keep it in-house pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, part of the goal here, and I guess we'll talk about this kind of stuff later, but I've just never wanted to be 6 months to a year out, right? We could have done that model. Yeah. I could have taken a whole bunch of people's deposit money and then just been further out and told them that it was worth waiting. But yeah, that's not the end goal. So we've been lucky that the growth has been nice and solid, and we haven't outpaced ourselves.
No, that's right. Well, let's go back. Let's roll back a ways and just kind of set sort of the paint the picture of how this even got to what the conversation we're having right now. So, like, when did you get started in competition shooting? How did you get into it? And when did you know, like, you were screwed, like you were in?
So it's funny, my old man was a gun guy, just like guns are his thing, right? Yeah. And but a true gun guy, like, doesn't know shit about shooting, probably doesn't want to know anything about shooting, but super reloader, super gun guy into weird wildcat calibers. So every year we went to this gun show. They do it in a school, funny enough. They still do to this day.
That's great.
Vermont's a little weird. We haven't pushed them out of the schools yet, but it's coming, I guess.
Yeah. Well.
But we go to this gun show every year, and that was like a super fun day. I mean, I remember doing it since I was a little kid. But at this gun show, there was the Green Mountain Practical Shooters, which is my home club now. And they had a booth, and every year we're like, oh, great, we're going to do this. And you get the schedule, and I don't know, we always looked at it. But my old man was pretty religious, and they always did them on Sundays.
Yeah.
So we never got him to go, and the major matches that were on Saturdays, whatever, it never worked out. So I was in my mid-20s, and I went to the gun show with a buddy of mine, and we ran into the booth or whatever, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do that. Like, I'm just doing it. Like, I'm going to go. Or maybe my buddy had actually prompted me a bunch. He's like, let's just go watch one. So we drove up, watched one, and I was hooked the day I saw it happen.
Really?
Like, you can play all the video you want, but until you see it happen live, it's like, oh, this is it.
Well, I
So-
personally think the video is like pretty dull, but that's me.
It is. It doesn't do it justice if this
Yep.
is something you'd be into.
Yeah, totally.
So shot the next match, and then I kind of, not maybe a written down goal, but I definitely said to myself, like, I want to be a top 2 or 3, 5 shooter in this club, and that probably happened within 2 years.
Mm.
And then I'm still on the board for that club. I was vice president for a long time. So I just super involved, like shot every single month. I rarely missed one. It was probably the most important weekend of the month for a long time.
What were you shooting?
Honing those skills.
What were you shooting in those days?
So the very first match, I mean, again, my background was kind of being a gun guy, right? The guy at the gun store talking about shit we don't know about.
Yeah.
And just what we read or someone else said and we believe it,
totally.
Not really putting any of it to paper and proving it. But so I shot a SIG 229 my first match, like a SIG Elite 229. I had a couple of them. And it was real quick to figure out, whoa, that thing is not designed for what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
So pretty quickly into a Glock 35.
Okay.
And I shot that for probably at least a year. And then I was ready to take it up a notch. And so the question was, and this is before the Caspian frame guns had died. They're dead now, essentially. No one's running that platform. But so the question, and Caspian's a parts manufacturer here in my hometown. They're probably only 15 minutes from my club. My club's an hour. Yeah, so they're not, from where I sit today, they're probably an hour and a half away. The cool part about Caspian was that they had some really innovative stuff in the 80s and early 90s. The founder died. The kids took over, and there's been zero innovation since, and the quality might not be what it was one day.
Yeah.
So that but they make a steel frame for anybody who's, this is an interesting history lesson a little bit. If you're new to the 2011 world or whatever, when STI came out with that, they patented the modular frame so that the grip and the frame are separate, and they put a plastic grip on there. Well, Caspian had an all steel lower metal frame that they forged and then milled, and they still make it, but it had just a couple shortcomings, and the big one was that it held 1 or 2 less rounds, and they never got the magazines squared out. So they were kind of just using a CZ design rip-off mag, and they never, a little bit of tweaking, I think they could have figured the mags out, but they never got the mags perfected.
Yeah.
So
that lack of capacity is a killer too.
The 1 or 2, it was overcome. I think that could have been overcome if somebody had looked hard at the problem, but again, the innovation there was done.
Yeah.
But at the time, the only guy shooting that platform was Travis Tomasi, and he ran at the time mostly limited 10. But if you think about it, that platform was way above the STI grips, because as soon as you put steel grips on all of these 2011s, the guns perform better. Well, that gun just had it all integrated. That was already became that way. So anyway, because of the capacity and them being slightly more popular, so easier to get parts, easier to use, I went with the STI platform. So I needed a gun, quick. At that point, the wait times were up to 2 years. It was crazy. So this is old too. I don't even know if it exists anymore. But I jump on Enos. There's not really anything I'm looking for exactly there. And then back in the day, USPSA had a classifieds page on their webpage, like classifieds listing. And I don't know if they still do or not. They did at one point, yeah.
Let me see. I'll look it up while you're talking.
But so anyway, jumping on there, and there's a guy in Maine, a state and a half away from me, and he's got an edge that he says is all tricked out, it's ready to go. He won the Northeast sectional with it, and I'm like, all right, great, this will work. So buy the gun, shows up, maybe not quite as advertised, start shooting it a little bit. Gun has issues, and then running that platform, there's some issues. So there's a learning curve, and we're probably the only company you can switch to a 2011, and if you get the mags and the gun from us, pretty much run it right out of the box. The only thing you'd have to learn, like coming off a Glock, is the thumb safety and getting that off. But there's a learning curve with these platforms, because the mags want to be set up just right, and the guns, they're not built right or real particular about different ammo or mags or whatever.
Yep.
So I'm fighting through this gun, and I'm going to nationals that year for the first time, and I'm like, I just realized that I'm not taking a Glock as a backup gun, like 2 different mag sets, like that didn't make sense.
No.
So I go on the hunt for a backup gun, and I'm like, well, all right, I'm going to spend more this time, and I'm going to get something that's, that I can just run right out of the box. And again, the wait times are way longer than I can wait. So I'm on the used market, and anybody who's bought a gun off Enos or from anywhere used, the guy always runs like a top, right? This thing's never had a hiccup. They're all perfect.
Yeah.
Which we know is not true, but
not in that area for sure. Yeah.
So anyway, I buy a used SV gun.
Yep.
It has apparently a super low round count. It's a nicer gun than the STI gun at that point. I'm like, all right, this is a better gun. It certainly looks cooler.
Yeah.
So that became my primary gun. And it took a little bit to get that running. Somebody had messed with the extractor and that had an AFTEC in it. I had to send it back to SV. They tore out all the non-SV parts, sent it back. And we got it going, gun ran. I got it back probably a couple weeks before I went to nationals. Go to nationals. Gun hammer follows at nationals at the chrono table. And the guy's like, did you see that? And I'm like, nope. And he's like, a hammer fall. And I almost didn't believe him. I'm like, yeah, maybe he did something. Like, I don't know.
Right.
So I put it out of my mind, shoot the rest of the match. It only hammer follows one more time.
Yeah.
Get back from nationals, send the gun back. And then they tell me the barrel's cracked and they want to put a whole new top end on it. So I didn't have that gun for a period of time, 6 months or something like that. So in that time, we had been messing around with 6-inch guns. So, and that's kind of where it comes back to my business partner. So at the time, I'm friends with my business partner, Todd, and he's a machinist. And he said, well, why don't you just buy the parts and we'll build one? So actually off Enos, I bought a 6-inch top end, a whole top end, but no lower part, but a built top end.
Yeah.
I think it was a Benny Hill top end.
Yeah.
And so we built the bottom half of the gun, put it all together. Gun worked awesome. And I'm like, all right, sweet. So I got a 6-inch gun going. This is before steel grips. So the recoil impulse on the 6-inch guns was really nice with a plastic grip.
Yeah.
Put a metal grip on there, and I don't think that equation works well. So anyway, shooting the 6-inch guns, and then in the spring that SV comes back. And I'm like a kid at Christmas. I know what our customers feel like when they're waiting for that FedEx or UPS box,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm on the range the day it's coming. I know it's coming. It's Friday, and I'm having it delivered at the time I can shoot at my place.
Yep.
So I'm out back at the range shooting, and the FedEx guy pulls up. Literally, we stopped shooting so I could get the sign for the FedEx, take the box back. I shot 2 mags through that gun and realized I don't like plastic grip 5-inch guns. And it was on Enos that night. It was gone. I'm done. No emotional connection. I'm such a performance-driven person that if it's not a performance thing, I don't care what they look like or whatever. I don't need a pretty gun. I want it to win stuff, work better. So I sold that gun and then realized that I'm on the 6-inch kick, right? So Todd built me 2 more 6-inch guns. One, we did the same thing. We did a top end. I found a top end on Enos. We built the bottom half, and then we built one from zero. So I had 3 guns. That's the ideal ticket for anybody who's super serious about competition. You got a match gun, a practice gun, and then a complete backup gun just sitting there.
Yeah.
So anyway, Todd and I kind of at that point, then he built me a single stack. I think we built another 5-inch 9mm double stack, and then we're kind of kicking around, hey, should we do this?
So
at the time,
this all like downtime at his shop or something like that, or were you?
No, he worked for a big company. He did a lot of it on the weekends at home.
Okay.
Just
all right. Cool.
Off. Favor to me, really.
Yeah, I got it. All
and we kicked around the idea of starting a company at that point, and the patent was still on or just coming off. So the issue there is you decide you're going to build all those guys who built for all those years while STI had the patent. If STI decided that they weren't selling enough guns, they could just shut off the extra frames, and they're the only ones who have them. They have a patent.
Yeah.
And SV had already done that. SV was selling frames up until the mid-2000s, and then somewhere in the mid-2000s, they stopped selling frames without you buying a whole gun.
Yeah.
So So anyway, we looked at that and it's like, well, that's kind of a crappy business model, right? Come in there. And so we let that sit for a good couple years, and then the steel grips start to come out. And I think the first one was the Phoenix Trinity. They're just their regular one, but those grips come out, and I stumble into one of the first ones, and we put it on one of my match guns, or my match gun, and we shot it, and it changed everything. So I shot that grip, and I was like, done. Everyone should have one of these. It's the ticket. And then my training partner, Randy Lopez, who's a grandmaster at the time, he shot it and ordered one on Monday. And then James, who wasn't a GM then, but is now, and James runs our CNC stuff, but same thing at a club match, they shot that gun and he ordered a steel grip. Actually, SV came out with the grips first.
Okay.
So,
yeah, because
the PT was the first one I had. And the SVs, I don't know if they were retailing them, I guess, right out the gate. But so James ended up buying an SV grip and Randy bought a PT grip. And we everyone's switching, right? And so that started a conversation between me and Todd that, hey, there's a call to action now. The patent's up, so you don't have to worry about the frame problem as much. And everyone is going to upgrade to a steel grip.
Yep.
Right? So the 100,000 plus of these guns that have been built over the last 20 or 30 years are obsolete. And the math just doesn't work retrofitting. Can it be done? Yes, but it's just generically, it's a bad idea. So what really we saw was going to happen in the marketplace was that there would be a call to action for these guys to get new guns.
Yep.
And then we go down the road of exploring, hey, does this make sense? And instead of building $2,800, $3,000 guns and competing at that lower end, let's build more expensive guns that are hand built, that have time in them, and compete at the top end.
Yeah.
So we kind of shifted the focus.
Yep.
And so anyway, the Atlas was essentially born, in the next year from then, of us just looking at this. And the real kicker was my training partner at the time was sponsored by a different shooter, a gun builder, and he was sponsored. He got guns for cost or something like that.
Yeah. And
he got a new gun in April of that next year. And we wasted, my training partner is Randy Lopez, and you'll hear him in lots of my stories.
Yeah.
But we wrecked a whole day of practice because his brand new gun just wouldn't need ammo and just wouldn't run at all. And I'm sitting there yelling at him, going, "Put it away and get out the old one so we can get to work," right? Practice with Randy's like a job. Like there's not a lot of. There might be some jokes before and after, but when we're there, we're working hard and we're thinking about what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so anyway, burn this practice, and he's all losing his mind about this. So he runs up to our buddy Al Zitta's place. Al at the time lived just a couple towns away, and Zitta literally gets Dremels out and cutting tools and starts cutting on a brand new gun. Oof. Oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. So Randy gets in the truck when it's done, and he goes, and Zitta builds people guns in his spare time. He's retired, but he goes, I get why he gets $6,000 for them.
Yeah.
And that was really the birth of the company.
Okay.
I'm like, oh, like the light bulb went on. I get why they're different.
Yeah.
Not 100%. Like I didn't see it all. It doesn't, not like it makes sense to me today, but guys are like, why buy this gun or an STI gun? And I'm like, well, the amount of care that goes into these is so different. And what you get from that is a super predictable outcome, right?
Yes.
All the Atlas guns either are a level of quality, or they're not an Atlas gun, right? They don't make it.
That's it. Yeah.
And you can't do that by doing anything fast and cheap. And when you do it fast and cheap, you might get an okay gun, but you're never going to get an amazing gun, and you won't get an okay gun every time. You might get a total piece of junk.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the first times I was talking with you about this, you were like, look, anybody can sit at home. We were talking about your videos, which I want to dive into a little later, but you're like, anyone could stumble upon a runner in their basement. Like you could put all the parts together and it could run.
Right.
But then you go to do it again and you can't, maybe you even get another runner, but they're not anything alike in the way they perform.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
And so it's that consistency. It's like if I buy a Titan today, I've got the one I've been running for, a little over a year now. They're gonna be like, if not the same, very, very similar.
Yeah.
And that's the predictable
outcome.
outcome.
Totally true.
Yeah. And that comes from, having somebody in there actually looking at every single part going through the gun.
Well, and so think about, for a second, almost everybody who builds these guns, with the exception of SVI, is using other part manufacturers and potentially up to 20 or 30 part manufacturers.
Yeah.
I think we're down to 7, but and you'll see us weighing that down to much lower than that over the next few years. But the issue is that the parts are not, everybody thinks because we have CNC machines that we have this, magical machine that turns out the same part over and over every single time. And that's totally not true. And then the other part that nobody talks about is all these parts get heat treated, and the heat treat process changes the metal, tempers the metal, changes it. And the heat treat process is imperfect. So batch to batch things are wildly different and consistent. And there's some parts that we used for the first 4 years that we don't use anymore because they've got a problem with their heat treat process, or that's what we suspect, but the parts don't work, so we can't use them. People are like, oh, why don't you use this part? And I'm like, they used to be great, now they suck. I can't control what someone else is doing there.
Yeah.
So what's different about us is twofold. When you want someone to build you a gun, there has to be 2 things that work in that front, especially when they're getting outside vendor parts.
Yep.
One, they have to be willing to scrap the part if it can't be saved, or be able to spend the time to rework it. My favorite 1911 builder is Chuck Warner, right? You could send Chuck the most crooked, jacked up Colt gun in the planet, and he will weld up whatever he has to and recut it and make it straight and perfect. And you're going to pay him $5,000 to make a Colt awesome, but it will be perfect it will be blueprinted and perfect when you get it back.
Wow.
Our approach here is a little less love and a little more economics. So if we wouldn't do that because it's not our business model. But if we had a frame that was completely crooked, we just throw it out.
Yep.
Get a new one, right? Or if it can't be fixed. So you have to have somebody who's willing to lose money. I say this a lot to people, and I think people have a hard time believing it, but it's totally true. There are days where I send 2 Titans out, and one we made our margin on and one we lost money on, literally upside down in the gun. They're the same gun, performance-wise. You wouldn't know the difference. But one of them, the parts were not correct, and we either threw parts out or took time to correct them. And time is money. So So for us as a company, we're always, focusing on trying to make things faster and less wasteful. And that part of that's being able to control the part supply and the quality of the parts. And the bigger you get, the easier that gets.
Well, yeah, you get
so one is
economy of scale in there as well, too, right?
Right. Yep. And being able to order batches. We buy slides now in batches of 100, and we go through them all. And if we got to send some back, we're not sitting there not having a slide to build a gun with.
Yeah.
The parts are so hard to get. A lot of these small gun builders are like, it's the only thing I have, so I got to use it.
That's right.
Right. If you got a guy who builds 49 guns a year, so he doesn't pay the tax, the excise tax, which a lot of these guys are at that deal, then he's building basically a gun a week. Let's say he makes $1,000 a week on $1,000 a gun. He's making $1,200 a week to build a gun. Most of these guys can't go 2-3 weeks without building a gun. Like that, just the economics of that doesn't work.
No.
So they get jammed up a lot of times, and you got to send one out that's not perfect. Versus here, on a good week, we're doing 10 plus guns. If we got to stop and correct one, I'm not taking the one guy that's working on making money. That one man gunsmith is the opposite version of this.
Oh yeah.
Where he's got to stop and fix that one thing. Same thing with service work. But the second part of the equation is some of these guys just aren't talented enough to know what they need. Like, what do the specs have to be? So you need to find somebody, if you're getting a gun builder or a company, that can identify what is required, to make this thing right. What every single moving piece, and these are tight tolerance guns. That 1911 design is relatively complicated.
Yep.
And then you got to be able to spend the time and money to do it. So it's a 2-phase thing. We see a lot of times that, when we don't do service work on outside guns anymore, but when we used to, you'd see stuff and you're like, why did he do that? The guy that saw it before you. And then the answer, after I've done this enough times, is they just didn't know, right? They hadn't been taught that, or they're not a metal guy. And the coolest part about my business partner, Todd, is that he's not a gun guy. He didn't come from the gun industry. Almost all these, I call them garage gunsmiths, but almost all these guys, and even some of the big players, they started in their garage doing this on the weekends, and it became more profitable than their day job, so they quit their day job.
That's right.
So Todd, my business partner, is a master machinist that I just stole from a different industry. He just left his industry job, but Todd's what we call a metal man. He's been working with metal his whole life. He understands how metal works and tempers and changes. And if you don't have that 20 plus year background before you get here, there's something that you're missing, in the equation that we have. I'm lucky that that's where Todd comes from, and I have that here at Atlas Gunworks.
Yeah, it takes a whole learning curve out. That's for sure.
A lot. And then the platform itself has a huge learning curve. And until you build 1,000 guns, there's a lot of stuff you're not going to see.
I don't take any, because I'm a part owner in a shop down in Iowa called Hawkeye Ordnance, right? And we've been like the blue collar gunsmiths for the 3-gun world for 7 years now, right? Totally out of our garage, or it's Blair's garage. It's heated with, now wood pellets, but it used to be split logs, so we could work in the winter, right?
Right.
And we produce like 2 of these $2,000 2011s a year called the Einherjar, right? And literally that gun, the parts picked for that gun were based on what parts are most always available.
Yeah.
Because we wanted to do it for $2,000. And so it was like we couldn't be jammed up on parts, right? And they can't do anything custom. We can't, but we can produce a gun for $2,000 that is as good or better than like, a Rock Island that's decked out. Right.
Right.
And that's the goal of that gun. It isn't even to compete with an SDI necessarily. Right. It's to compete with a Glock 34. And but literally when we looked at this, it was like, cause I learned a lot just from listening to you. I was like, Blair, if you're going to do this, you need to pick parts that like, you just like go online right now and find out, start with the big stuff, the grips, slides, and frames, right? And find the ones that for the next 2 months you could buy every day if you wanted to. Right. And like, that's how we picked the parts for that gun, because we don't have the time to do what you're saying. And we don't have the time to fix those guns. We do 50 of those damn shotguns a month, there just isn't time for that. And so it's a really weird industry because the part, like the quality of the parts that come out are so hit or miss. And if you're buying one and you got a 25% fail rate with the part you're getting, that means every time you buy one, you've got a 25% chance it's unusable.
And it's even more complicated. I'm not sure that, I don't know why. I certainly can tell you why the industry is weird, but the industry is weird on quality and production rates. And all of manufacturing's been hit hard. This whole country's probably suffered a bunch from the concept of lean manufacturing, right? So lean is you're making stuff just in time and you're not carrying the inventory because you've got to pay taxes on the inventory at the end of the year. And there's different ways to do it, but when you go super lean, when you let the accountants decide how you're going to do production runs, it really hurts the flow. So we see that in the gun industry, and I think it's partly because a lot of the guys that run these companies are not business manufacturing guys. I'll pick on Dave Dawson, but Dave came from STI as a gunsmith and then started making parts and blah, blah, blah. So Dave didn't run a big manufacturing company, for 20 years before he got into gun parts. And the companies that we see, and I've seen 2 or 3 at this point, manufacturing companies that come into the gun part industry, a lot of them leave. So what I take away from that is, this industry is tricky. Yeah. And so that when we have that lean manufacturing thought process down, there's a lot of sales that get lost, and a lot because of the timing. And so the end user, the gunsmith or the gun builders, are the tough ones. And we still fight this. I mean, we're going to buy well over $1 million worth of parts next year. And I'm still fighting with vendors to deliver when they said they would or on time, and there's still tons of flow problems. And it's a lot better, but there's still issues.
Yep.
I mean, there's some parts that you'll see us make because a vendor just screws us and doesn't get the parts anywhere near on time, and I just say, all right, we're going to have to go out back and make them.
Yep.
And that's happened. There's a whole line of parts. So and people ask us what the reasoning is for when we start to make parts on our own machines. And the answer is either someone can't make them right. We got a batch of firing pin stops recently that are all undersized so that it allows the extractors to clock a little bit. Well, they don't work well when they're moving left to right. You know? So we didn't have a choice. The vendors don't want to admit they screw up. In this industry, the guns is worse than general manufacturing, but general manufacturing, there's some of that too. But so the only option was wait 6 weeks and hope they didn't screw up the second batch, and we can't not make guns for 6 weeks, or go out back and fire up the machines and make firing pins right, or firing pin stops right.
That's right.
So that's what we did.
And then one shows up in my mailbox, and it's like, take a picture of this. All right, great.
Right.
We're good. Yeah.
Right. We're making them now because we have to. We don't have a choice.
Yeah. Well, and you and I have had a lot of conversations, and not to let the cat out of the bag, but I mean, there's obviously a day coming where, you would like to be 100% or mostly in control of your parts. I mean, you're down to what you said, 7 vendors now from something like 20 plus before, right? I mean, that's the ideal, right? Is that you've got all the pieces.
Yeah. And there's two schools of thought on that, and I don't think either one is right. The general school of thought in the past is buy everything. It's cheaper to have someone else make it. And then you're starting to see companies who want to make everything in-house themselves. Mm-hmm. And the true answer is there's a mix that will work. But what you'll see us do over time is, especially on a lot of the small parts, we'll have outside vendors make, like grip bushings. But we'll buy huge quantity and be able to drive the price and the quality down, quality up, price down, buying huge quantity from a vendor. I doubt you'll ever see us make an actual grip bushing in house here. It doesn't. Right. That's not a good use of our time. But or the screws and the guns. Some of the guys are making their own screws and springs. It's really probably not a good use of time to do that kind of stuff. So you'll see us probably use non-gun industry vendors as time goes on, because getting outside of the gun industry takes away the ebb and flow of the gun industry itself, and you get to deal with much bigger companies who are much more production oriented, so they're faster, better quality.
I get it.
More on time.
Really great. Well, that's a lot about the production of this, and really even the early business. But what was the early design philosophy? So at this point, you've got these 6-inch guns that you've now, and you've got these steel grips in your hands, and you guys are trying to figure out what you're going to go to market with. It's not that you reinvented the wheel necessarily with the early guns, but what was your philosophy around this?
So, the concept in the beginning was only steel grips, and with the exception of 2 guns, I think we've held true to that. We've only built 2 that didn't have steel grips. So the steel grips are a game changer. We'll build you any gun you want with a steel grip.
Okay.
And I had retrofitted all 3 of my 6-inch guns with steel grips. So at the time, I probably would have told you that the 6s and the 5s are equal, or the 6s might be a little better or whatever.
Right.
What the cool part about here at Atlas is that I test fire just about every single gun myself. And so I personally get a lot of feedback. And so, from the guns when we're shooting them. Mm-hmm. So what we started to see with the steel grips quickly was that the 5-inch steel grip guns shoot better than the 6s, right? The 6 becomes a sluggish, kind of too big, overdone deal. And so pretty quickly, and before the steel grips, there was this trend in the industry where 6s and 5s would switch popularity every couple years.
Okay.
So 6s would come back into fashion and then go out and come back and go out. And partly the reason that those were the 2 numbers, which we kind of fell into later, those are the 2 numbers because those are the slide sizes people make.
Okay.
Nobody's we'll hack these things up into some other thing. They're just I can buy a 5 or I can buy a 6.
No, I got it. Yeah.
Right. It just was the set thing.
Yeah.
And And we really won't. I mean, at this point, I guess somebody could maybe talk me into a 6-inch gun, but it doesn't make sense to me. So why would I? I don't want to make guns that don't have a purpose.
Okay.
And because I'm always thinking nobody keeps these things forever, right? So I just don't want some gun that has no love 5 years from now because we built it for this dude and he got out of shooting or sold them, or he saw the light and bought the other, the better platform. And we've got these two weirdo guns that are just sitting there and essentially have no value. That I think that devalues the brand, and it's kind of sad. Like these things are tools, they
Totally.
provide to me fun.
Yep.
Like this is the sport we love.
Yep.
So in that world, I don't want to build something that has no purpose.
Well, look, I'm more connected to my pistol than any other firearm I own. There's something about a pistol for me that it's like, because I'm a 3-gunner, right? And there's something about a pistol that is a little more. I have like a more intimate relationship than I do with my shotgun or my rifle, right? And like I love my pistol, but it is a tool, and at some point, like there'll be another tool.
Right.
It really is that simple. Right. And I mean, these are not guns that are like. These are, my competition handgun, like I've eaten it in the dirt face first with my gun, and it's gone along the gravel. Yeah. And like, well, I'm not stoked about that. I'm also not like my relationship with the firearm. It's not like isn't, something I'm really bummed about if it gets scratched up. Cause I mean, I don't like that, but the truth is it's a tool. I use it. I use it aggressively. And well, I like my stuff to look cool and be awesome. It's still just, it's hardware.
Right. And my favorite pistol is and rifle at the same moment is the one I trust the most. Right.
Yeah, totally.
The one I've shot the most recently, the one I have the most rounds on. That I just want to win. To me, they're all tools. I don't care hardly at all what they look like. Rarely at this point do I get excited about how cool something looks. If I could have something that was, bright yellow and it was that much and it gave me a 1% better chance to win, I'd take it.
Yep. I got it.
It's all performance in my mind. And that's what's kind of cool about Atlas Gunworks is, so James is, my good buddy, and we shoot and get to travel all over together, but he's got a mind to make this stuff look cool. So the design side of this is James Fucci, right? I mean, this is his brainchild. We sign off on everything, but and we definitely, there's some internal coaching here, and like, we like that, we don't like this. I'm not afraid to tell him I hate something. I've said that. I was like, yeah, I hate that. And sometimes what I hate, other people like. So, so from a mindset, we make them look cool because you guys won't buy them if we don't.
That's right.
But that is not my purpose in the morning, to make stuff that looks cool. I mean, I'm driven by the performance side.
Well, and maybe it's that marriage that works, right? I mean, because the gun's got to work, or there's just not gonna. It doesn't matter how cool it looks, right? Eventually,
absolutely.
But there is the thing. Like from my perspective, from as your marketing director, is like, I mean, I can't sell it through pictures if it looks like shit too, right? So there has to be that balance. So maybe, I mean, look, that's what great partnerships are about, right? Is everybody brings something different to the table.
Yeah. We've been super lucky. I mean, everybody we work with's got a bunch of talent in their field. So and none of that was necessarily super by design. It all kind of came together.
When do you think when did you get that you were, well, let me ask this differently. So we've kind of hit on the early days of like design and business and production. And we'll talk a little bit more about design when we actually get into some of the models of gun, but like, there was, so when let me frame it this way. I'm not sure quite how to walk into this. So let me just try to frame it this way. So I found out about you a couple of years ago, right? And Adam Maxwell, who's now at Vortex, was working with me, and he's like, there's this guy, and he's putting these videos out on how to make these guns, like every bit of it, right? And I'm like, because I mean, my experience has been, I was working with I had a short fling with another builder, a smaller builder than you at the time. And I mean, he makes a great gun. It was a wonderful pistol, but it was the same story. It was like, like expedited was 12 months, and you could never get the guy on he didn't answer the phone because he was either busy or didn't have an answer for you or whatever the deal was. And it's the same story everybody was dealing with. And like, I mean, I remember having to sign a non-disclosure agreement to like go from like the office to the shop. And, you know, and it wasn't like the shop was like anything special. It's just that like, that was like the whole world. It was like, no one gets to know, you know, like there's some sort of magic dust back there or something, right? You can't see the magic dust, right? And I'm like, okay, well, and there was something about that. It was kind of sexy. You know, you're like, these are special and there's some pixie dust in there or whatever the deal is that I am not allowed to see. And so then Adam comes with me and he's like, dude, there's this guy. And it's amazing. He's putting these videos out and it's like all the stuff that no one wants to tell you about these guns. And you should talk to him. And that's kind of how you and I got introduced. And like, first of all, I guess, how did the YouTube channel start? Maybe we should start there. Like, when did you decide you were going to go out there? Like, because I mean, frankly, like in the 2011 world, you're like Pete Brownell was, or Brownells was in the 1970s, right? Like the Gunsmiths Guild was like magicians. You couldn't know anything. And then Brownell puts out this little manual, you know, he was of how to like do your own gunsmithing, right? And then started selling parts to support that. And that was a huge disruption in the marketplace, like massive. And he's built an empire on it, frankly. So
yeah.
When did you, like, what was the impetus for doing these videos and just sort of like talking openly about, you know, what were arguably trade secrets at that time?
So two parts. One, coming into this, you know, we started slow. Todd didn't quit his day job right away. So, you know, my job here is building a brand and marketing it. And I had not done that, you know, on a national level. I've started a bunch of companies. They've always been local. I've never marketed something that's manufactured in the firearms industry or whatever. So I knew I didn't know a lot about marketing. And so that led me to read a bunch of books. And what I really didn't know a lot about was the digital marketing. So I go read a bunch of books about digital marketing, and probably the most profound thing, and certainly probably had the biggest impact on our business, is that I read a book. I won't even be able to remember what it's called, but the guy was, I want to say he was one of the big time Microsoft guys, but he's like, listen, give away good content, like give away information people need and wait. It's that simple. He goes, you want people to be drawn to you, give it away.
Yep.
And so that struck an chord with me, because at that point, coming in before we started the company, and we really, and we had Al Zitta really show us the ins and outs of these guns. Before any of that, I had figured out how to keep these, you know, these other guns I had running. The first STI, you run to Brian Enos, right? And there's a wealth of knowledge on there. You just have to sift through tons of bad information. Yeah. And it's no knock on Brian Enos. That's just how the forums work, right?
Yeah, totally.
Anybody gets an opinion, and a lot of them are not good. So I just remember struggling. So that I'm reading the book, and I'm just thinking, I'm closing my eyes for a second going, oh man, I just remember spending like hours and weeks trying different stuff to find the answer to a problem. And I was fairly active back then on that forum, just because I had this information, and I felt like if I could save somebody a bunch of wasted energy. Yeah. I'm a super efficiency freak, right? Yep. So I just want everything to just flow and work. And our most valuable asset here on time, no matter how much money you make, is still time, right? And the more money you make in life, the more time becomes valuable, but as an offset percentage. But time is our most valuable asset. Like, I have a million things that I would like to do that I want to get to, and anytime I'm messing with my gun, you know, trying 8 different things, and the not knowing part sucks too. Yep. So that just struck a chord, and I'm like, hey, there's been a personal journey for me. I mean, I didn't know how to build. Wasn't born knowing how to build these guns. I don't even have a machining background. That's probably why the videos play as well as they do, because I literally had probably just learned something that I'm showing you. But
I got it.
So,
I do. That's
right?
all of my videos. Those early videos I made for getting started in 3-gun, which have been seen in the millions now, right? We're like, I had a $150 video camera from Target, and I just learned, like, this is actually what you need to that works. And I was like, here you go, you know, because no one else was going to say it. So here it is, right?
Yeah, and I think you and I both come from the school where we're pretty brash. I mean, we're going to say what we think, and we're right way more than we're wrong. And people love you or they hate you for that. And I'm totally willing to live with the consequences of that scenario. I mean, my whole life's been like that, so that's just how it is.
Yep.
But So the book says give free information, and I'm like, oh, I could save everybody. I can make this journey a lot simpler for everyone.
That's right.
And so and the cool part about that, and we haven't done as much of that in the last couple years, or the last year since we've been in the new building, but you'll see us come back to it, and it'll be even better, more highly produced, probably because you're involved.
Yeah.
But there'll be more really high-end content coming.
Cool.
But the thought process is this: I want everyone to be an Atlas owner, and some people are like, oh, it's too bad. I just, I bought an STI gun or whatever, and I jokingly say, but I think it's true. All roads lead to Atlas, right? I mean, eventually you're going to need another gun or a better gun, and I think we've made the equation really hard to not buy an Atlas gun.
Yep.
So, so we don't. At this point, we don't worry about those sales, but in the beginning, it was kind of a two-part thing. One, it would get us some service work for sure, and it would get us some gun builds. But there are some folks who, just from an economic standpoint, will never be able to afford an Atlas gun.
That's right.
And at the end of the day, on the weekends, those guys are doing the same thing I'm doing. My favorite thing to do is to go shoot matches on the weekend, and they're doing the same thing, and they love the same thing. Yeah. So if we can help, if in the course of our marketing, we can also help folks that will never own an Atlas gun, that's an added bonus to me. My favorite thing to hear is, hey, I love the videos, thanks so much.
Yeah, right.
And the videos were really geared to the shooting community, guys who are out here, the guys probably listening to this podcast, who are real shooters and going out and, shooting matches and learning about, the actual art of shooting, versus the gun guys. But we help those guys too. And it's not, they're part of our community. It's maybe a different, we're a different subsect. But so anyway, it was kind of it was a little bit of the give back, but mostly just like, hey, when we're out racing, I don't want to lose to you because your gun choked up. I just want to beat you because I'm better than you are.
Dude,
right?
and that is so like the culture of our game too. Like, I mean, how many times have you seen somebody give up like, a higher position because they loan their equipment to somebody whose stuff went down, right? I mean, it's just like a sport. You would never see that in golf. Like some guy's driver goes down and then like the next guy's like, oh, hey, here's my, worth the 5,000 or whatever, knock it out, right? That's how little I know about golf. By the way, just as a funny aside, I don't golf. And this is a great story. I was down my last business was vacation real estate, right? So I was really involved like down in Anguilla and the Turks and Caicos and all this kind of stuff, right? So I'm down in Anguilla and we're specking out this piece of land for a Nicholas course, right? And we're gonna buy and build a bunch of these like 4-bedroom houses on this golf course and all this, right? So the guys that are doing the full development drive us around and we arrive at what's going to be the signature hole. It's like you got to imagine like the breakwater over this volcanic rock that's separating the tee box from the green, right? And they've got this thing laid out where it's going to be. It's not it's not the actual hole, but it's close. And there happens to be like a bottle of champagne chilling there when we get there. And like the guy gets out, he pulls out some new driver, and there's like dudes that I'm with. These guys are all multi-millionaires many times over, and they're all like, "Oh, that's the new club or whatever," And they hand it to me to like take the first shot off the box, and I'm like, I don't think this is a good idea, but what am I going to do? No, right? So I put the ball down, and I start to kind of get into a grip in a stance, and I look back at my friends, and they're looking at me like, you don't look like you do this, right? And I think I crank off this shot, and that ball goes like 30 yards, slices to the left, hits the rocks, and comes flying back, and literally everybody on the deck of the tee box has to hit the ground so they don't get hit by this returning golf ball. And so now pretty much I just tell people I can kill a guy like 50 feet behind me playing golf. And I just don't do it. But that's my last golfing experience, just as an aside. It's a weird world, but like that's the thing. It's like you would never see that in our sport, right? And I also get a sense from you that like I don't know if you think about this very often or if at all, but like there's something about like the ethos at Atlas, and I think this is consistent with a lot of gun companies too. I mean, certainly like here at Syndicate that we're about is like we want to see the whole thing get better. Like the equipment, the marketing, the conversations, the people, size and number and quality. Like I want to see all of that get better. And it's sort of like the gun sales or the marketing sales or whatever you're up to, when you live that philosophy, of like, we're going to make it all better. We're going to just do everything we can to elevate the sport. That the success is sort of a natural fallout of that. If you come to it from a place of like, I just need you to buy my damn gun, it's a very small game.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So the frustrating part, and my personal kind of avenue coming at this is, I wouldn't have started this company if I could buy a good gun in 60 days to 120 days. I just wouldn't have.
Yeah.
It was just, it was almost out of frustration. It's like, why can't, and then my other complaint, so the two complaints I had and the reason I've never, I bought a ton of these guns used, but I never bought any brand new, was I wasn't going to wait, a year plus ever. I could be racing cars in a year or dead or who knows what, right?
Right.
It's not a realistic time frame in my mind to plan around. And then the other part that was tough is that their guys, it seemed, the 2 or 3 people that I did entertain the idea of them building me a gun, I would have to get the gun and then send it to someone else to have some other stuff done because they wouldn't build it exactly the way I wanted.
Yeah.
The trigger was probably the biggest part in that, but a lot of these guys didn't do good trigger jobs. And I'm like, and a trigger job is like just absolutely paramount to making these things shootable.
Yep.
So that, those two barriers, like wait all this time and then I get the gun, and then again the trigger job might be 6 months, so the gun's tied up for a year and a half, 2 years, and I still don't guaranteed know what I'm going to get.
Yep.
And that was the other thing you'd hear from 4 guys that have a good experience with a builder, and then 2 guys or 1 guy wouldn't.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, am I going to get one of the good ones or not?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So that literally drove me into, partly just so I could have guns.
Yeah. When did you get though that like you were disrupting things? Like, there's something about like, if you read a lot of business books, there's this thing where it's like, you can either build what everybody else is building and beat them on price or speed or one of those things, right? But if you really want to like make a name for yourself, you want to elevate all of it, you've got to become a disruptor. There's some way of disrupting the way things are done, right? It's a complete and total, state change in the space. So when did that?
It wasn't a one-day thing.
Okay.
So the original plan was to shorten the lead times, right?
Yeah.
That was my crux. Like, just get a gun with a short lead time that doesn't need to have any extra work done to it.
Okay.
And so that was probably pretty disruptive in and of itself.
Yeah.
But there's always a new person saying they're going to do that, and the new guys aren't that busy, so they can probably do stuff fast, right? Is keeping that over a period of time is the hard part.
That's right.
That was our go-to thing, right? And then in the beginning, we were also doing a fair amount of service work, and what I think you saw in my mind, what changed is just the level of terrible work and service that some of the other industry folks were giving to the customers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, guys would send a gun in and they're like, oh, it's been back to the builder 4 times and it won't run, and he says it's perfect. And then we get it, we take it apart, and we're like, this thing's a mess inside. Like, this is what we call perfect. Like, this is good enough. It's not.
Yeah.
And that probably pushed us. There are plenty of folks who are intelligent and who can do a good job in this industry, and there are some doing that for sure.
For sure.
None come to mind off the top of my head, but there are guys doing a good job in the pistol world.
Yep.
And some of those guys don't have aspirations to be as big as we are, as we are today, or we will be, 10 years from now. But so kudos to the guys doing that. But there are a large percentage of folks who are doing a terrible job and then treating the customers terribly after the fact. And so the customer service side is just something that's built into me since I was a kid. Like, that's the business ethics that I was taught growing up. I still have them. They haven't changed.
Yep.
So I didn't come into this marketplace thinking that we were going to market that way and have that be like one of our big selling factors, but it ends up being that way because everyone else is so terrible. And I hadn't had personal experiences with a bunch of these folks up into that point, these other builders or companies or whatever.
Yep.
And then my customers tell us the horror stories, and you're like, oh, I can't even imagine that happened.
Yeah.
And so we were doing that. I just didn't know that was going to be a disruptor factor. So we're probably coming at it from 2 or 3 different angles.
Yeah.
And some of it was planned. I mean, the short lead time, really quality gun, set up the way you need it to be set up with all the, everything you need and nothing you don't.
That's right.
That was the original plan. But I think at the end of the day, the service side of stuff,
well, it's set a new bar for what's possible. So my experience with you is so this is just now we go like a step further, right? We met, and then it was like you had engaged me to look at, a conversation we do that we do with a lot of people. It's like, we spend a few hours looking and doing a deep dive on your business, and then we provide this like 1 hour conversation that's really the current marketing and some tactical next steps, right? And we offer this to any company that wants, because again, whether they work with us or not, I don't even care. This is like the giving it away part, right? Yep. And to be honest with you, we have an incredibly good closing ratio when those things happen. But the truth is that I just want the whole industry to look better, right? Because when I first got into 3-gun, I mean, like the pictures of people, I mean, inconsistent imagery and barrels laying on like some old ratty bear rug or something like that. I'm like, what the hell is this? So when you did say, look, okay, you engaged me to actually do some work, and I dug in, I started looking around. I mean, I just, the first thing you do is look at like what's out there, like what does everybody else look like? And frankly, it was like a lot of things. The things that stuck out immediately was everybody talks about precision and steel and blah, 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 right? And that is all fine and good, but it doesn't mean a damn thing to me. And I am your buyer, by the way. You know what I mean? I am, I'm
right.
Upper middle class, love to shoot, I can actually afford the gun, blah, blah, blah. So, and I will not say blah, blah, blah again. And so I looked at everything and I was like, none of these websites have a phone number on them. None of them do. And that was like the primary feature of your old website was your phone number was on it. I was like, that's interesting. But you were still talking about like the precision and stuff of the guns. And then, so like what I saw is just like, hey, why don't we just drop all of it? We'll put some really pretty pictures out there and then we'll say, call us. Right? I mean, remarkable concept, right? Just call us. And I mean, in any other industry that would be absolutely like duh, put your phone number on there, right? But I mean, we put it right in the center of the front of the page and just said, call us. Like, we actually answer the phone. We want to hear from you. And really, I mean, the marketing side of things was like, it was really easy at the beginning, especially because we were just like, call us, we'll answer the phone, and we'll get you your gun in what was it, 60 or 90 days, depending on what you bought, something like that. And I was just like, I think this is going to have legs, and it's easy. I mean, and why not be easy, right? If it can be. And I remember talking to you, and you were just like, this is before Kat was there, and you were having trouble getting work done because the phone was ringing off the hook.
Yeah, and we've always been again in the we didn't start this with one dude in a garage, so we've always had the strategic advantage that I could be on the phone and work still getting done.
Yeah.
And as time goes on, I spend even less and less time, on or doing actual production work. So most of my day now is, although I'd still do almost every trigger job, but my day is more managing, a multi-million-dollar business and the growth and the future and stuff like that. And I still spend a lot of time on the phone with customers, and then a little bit of time I get to do is R&D and cool stuff.
Yeah.
But we've always had the strategic advantage versus, if you call, Jimmy's gunsmithing and he takes your call, chances are he's literally stopped working on someone's gun. So the more success you have, the more it slows you down.
That's right.
It's a double-edged sword in that respect. So and then what we learned early, Todd and I figured this out early, not that we weren't probably on this path, but I think I don't know that you and I had a conversation, and maybe we did, but we realized early on that you have to scale this to make it work.
Yep.
So once you've been around for a couple of years, you're going to have service work come in. And the only way to manage that well is to scale. So the guys that come in, like let's say a gun comes in and somebody wants the coating refinished, or we had a coating fail and we're going to warranty it or whatever. To take a guy who has the skill set to build a gun and have him go out back and sand, and repolish the flats on a slide, you might as well set money on fire, right? There's no way to make that equation work. And you're just constantly chasing your tail, trying to get ahead a little bit and caught up, and you never will be. And that's where I think you see a lot of those lead times got so big. The guys just didn't know how to hire people and scale a company and train. And we're good at that here. I mean, I've got a background in doing stuff like that.
Yep.
So, and we're really lucky. I am pretty good at hiring folks. So our staff here is pretty rock star. And if somebody's not up to snuff, we'll figure that out pretty quick. And so we've got a bunch of competent people who want to work hard, and that allows us extra time to do stuff. And then you saw us this year introduce the service program. For $249, we'll fly your gun, the airmail both ways, and service it and do all the, an annual service to it. And that's a two-part thing. Part one is we just want to see our own guns, right? I want these guns to go as long as they can go. And sometimes you'll have a customer who buys an 11-pound ISMI spring, let's say, that says 11 on the package, and it's really a 6 in there. I mean, it's a $2 part that they're going to every now and then send one that's not right. And then beat their gun apart. Yep. And if you can catch that early enough, might be able to save somebody, $1,000 repair or something like that. So we want to see the guns. We do not have that attitude that these things, as soon as they're off warranty or whatever, are just, they're someone else's problem. We don't want anyone else to work on Atlas guns. We want them to come back here.
Yep.
And so the concept behind that was, make it super affordable, almost free. I mean, really, for the amount of work that and the airmail ticket, I mean, doing all that work for like, a little over $100 is a, we're not making a lot of money, or if any money on that, but we're scaling. So I have guys here who can work that in and keep those Atlas guns running. And that's part of the concept here, is that, you could pick on like a new Hyperion 9mm, gun or whatever. I mean, we expect those guns to go over 100K before they need a barrel. And at that point, it might just be a barrel, and then they do another 100+ K. Wow. On a 9mm minor gun, that's not unreasonable at all. And that's so there's amazing. Some value in the back end service that, I don't want to see these things ever, at the junkyard, let's say. Like, we want them on the road.
No, it'd be super cool to have someone's like kid, send you the gun to get set up because he's getting going, like it's like a hand-me-down Titan. Right. That'd be super cool. So speaking of the guns, let's talk a little bit about I don't want to spend too much time on the Titan and the Chaos, because I mean, if you want to know about the Titan, the Chaos, or the Titan Operator, there's probably, I Googled earlier, there's like, 3 Google pages of articles written on those. I mean, they're out there, check them out. There's a million videos, but let's talk a little bit about, like a couple of the new guns, like the Nemesis, which came out last year. So what had you go, I mean, traditionally people have been doing the Island, like that's what you see when it looks like, mass being added to the barrel. Like, what had you go to the sight block versus the Island?
A bunch of things. So the Island barrels are problematic.
Okay.
I won't get into super detail, but they have issues. And the other issue that we see from just a little more theoretical than you see in a practical sense, but you think about the accuracy of the gun and the very end of the slide that, move in there a quarter inch or so where the barrel locks up. That's the control for your accuracy. So if I cut a slot in the top of that slide, there's going to be flex in there. So from a theoretical standpoint, you have the opportunity to have a loss in accuracy. And the question is, does that happen immediately or over time? Is there a way to test that? Does that make sense? So add that potential problem to the fact that the barrels have problems with early failure rates. Then why would you take that risk? And so here's the thought process between on the sight tracker. The concept is the sight doesn't move, right? That's super cool. Yeah. Well, I've shot both a lot, and I can't see the front sight come towards me. I see it go up. No matter what gun I shoot, it goes up. But I've never seen it come towards me. I have had a few folks who swear to me that they can see it come towards them. In that case, you want a sight block or a sight tracker gun. But so for the most part, I would tell you that the sight tracker deal is a gimmick. There is no mechanical advantage to that. If anything, we're giving up some potential accuracy. So move away from that and come back to the Nemesis, right? And the Nemesis wasn't built trying to compete with sight trackers. That wasn't the goal. I've not been on the sight tracker train for some time. And there's plenty of nice sight tracker guns made. We've done them.
No, I'm asking the question from I'm a layman. What I know is what I've heard. I know
Sure.
I the gun in my hand and I'm like, well, this thing shoots great, or this sucks.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
So a lot of this is marketing, right? And
right.
We're not impervious to guys just trying to sell something. So the same conversation with stroking, does it matter, does it not? One guy's trying to sell it, it does matter, and the other guy's selling it's not. And the answer is it has appropriate times, in both scenarios. So the Nemesis was the idea not to do anything with a sight tracker deal, but there's a picture out on the internet somewhere of this STI sight block gun built in the 90s. And they literally took an edge and cut the whole front of it off and then welded like the bottom dust cover to the slide and made a block. And then that whole block is the top and bottom. It's funny. It doesn't look anything like a Nemesis, but we started out going, I just had that picture on my phone and I'm like, let's build this. We had it was rare at that point for Todd and I to have a free few minutes, but we had some production delay or something in some parts, and we had a minute to build a gun, right? And I needed a new gun. I was shooting a prototype gun that had an 8 ounce or 8 1/4 ounce, something like that, maybe 8 1/2 ounce slide on a limited gun. We were trying to break the slide. We just cut it everywhere. And it wouldn't break, but the gun didn't perform as well as it should have. And I was getting to the point where it was like, all right, well, it's time to buy, build me a real gun and not shoot this fighting that super light slide. For anybody who doesn't know, 8 1/2 is too light. The gun has a pretty nasty recoil with the slide moving that fast in a 40 cal.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I have this picture and we go to start to engineer this. And then we're just looking at and we're literally going to build this out of spare parts. So we have a slide that somebody screwed up, a 6-inch slide that somebody screwed up a while back that's sitting in a pile. We've got a frame with a gouge in it that's no good for a customer, blah, blah, blah. We've got a bunch of spare parts. So we're kind of putting it together on paper and trying to figure it out. And when you start with a 6-inch slide, we can cut it back to whatever we need, right?
Totally.
So we're messing with it and we're talking, and I just all of a sudden, and then it kind of dawns on me while Todd and I are having this conversation that USPSA changed the rules for limited division. Probably at that point it was 5 or 6 years before that, maybe 4. But when the thumb rest became available on those guns, then you could also do there used to be a rule, and don't quote me on this, but it's something like it had to sort of have a 2000 production run or something. Like you couldn't have some weird model that, it couldn't be like an open gun where you built this one-off thing.
Okay.
And so when they changed that rule, the new rules basically outline that it can be an open gun, but you can't have a dot sight, electric dot sight, and you can't have porting or comps. Other than that, it's an open gun. So while we're engineering this, I say that out loud. I'm just like, I think out loud. So if anybody's on the phone with me, bear with me that I'm thinking out loud constantly. But just kind of how I operate. So I say that out loud, and Todd kind of looks at me, and then I look at him and I go, well, why wouldn't we just build an open gun? And instead of we can't use a comp, so we'll make the block out of instead of titanium, we'll make it out of steel and not put holes in it. And we'll just make the block bigger and bigger and bigger until the gun returns to zero. It's a counterweight. That's all it is. The block's just a counterweight. Yeah. This is just physics. Mm-hmm. And so we were lucky that we had built the Chaos, and the Chaos has a 5-inch government slide where we cut 400 thou off the front and moved the comp back to get a MIDI gun. We were one of the early guys doing that. I'll give SV credit. I think they pioneered the MIDI gun. But we were the first ones to do it with a long dust cover. And again, that's just balance. We're just trying to make these guns return to zero. I don't care how we get the formula.
Yep.
But we had done that already, and so I said to Todd, I go, well, the guns, the 9mm major guns, which have a little bit more slide speed than a 40, but not a ton more. I go, those guns cycle so well. Like, we have no cycling problems because of the way that the timing works on that. I'm like, so let's just start with the gun cut at 4.6, and we'll move the block back, over the dust cover. And that gives you two things. One, I think I at the time, and we've proven it to be true, the guns have a really good timing with the slide less than 5, and 5 inch is not the correct slide length for a 40 cal or a 9mm. It's something shorter than that. And then it gives the block, will sit over the dust cover, and then if the block ends up coming loose, it can't go anywhere. It can't clock. The old open guns, when the comps would clock a little bit, it would stop the gun, because the gun wouldn't be able to come all the way fully in battery if it turned more than 2 or 3 degrees. So we prevent that. Chaos prevents that. All our stuff run along dust cover, so it's a 2-for-1. It's a balance thing in performance, and it also gets us not having to worry about the block or the comp coming loose. And it's stopping the gun, right? It gets you through a match.
I get it. Yep.
So the first one was really close. We did some adjustments, changed the block size a little bit. And then the second version is pretty much the gun I still shoot today. And the gun just returned to zero incredibly well. Like, we built this. No, I did not. This was not a plan to make this a thing.
Okay.
We were building me a super cool gun that might get us some attention. That was it.
Okay.
Like, this thing's cool. So I shot the gun, and it was outrageous. You're just like, this is too good. Like, this can't be true. And I really thought it was in my head. I just thought I wanted to believe it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So at the first match that prototype's finished for, I shoot the match with it. The gun was unbelievable. It felt like cheating. It really did.
Yeah.
And then I hand it to James, and I'm like, just shoot this. And he didn't have any R&D or anything in that. That gun was built out of spare parts. So James hadn't seen that. They didn't go across his bench.
Yeah.
So he shoots it, and he's like, oh, this is insanity. This is amazing. And so now I'm like, well, and he's probably as good a barometer as anybody, but again, I'm still like, I don't believe it. I'm not. Maybe we're just invested, right? Maybe we're emotionally invested in this.
Totally.
I don't know.
I got it.
So we get that gun in a whole bunch of people's, limited guys' hands, and 100%. This thing is second to none. Like, that returns incredibly well.
Yeah.
And what's cool about it, that design is it worked with a lot of different grip pressures. You didn't have to have a monster grip on the gun. If anybody who talks to me on the phone or sees the different times I'm talking about grip pressure, there are guys out there advocating for 100 pounds of grip pressure with each hand or more. And my hands are pretty strong, and I spend a little bit of time at the gym focused on my hands, and I do a lot of stuff that involving fat grips and stuff, but I don't like to shoot at 80 or 90% or even 70 probably of my potential grip pressure. I don't shoot well like that. Could I train into that? Potentially, but unfortunately now I spend more time here than I do out on the range. So yep. I shoot a lot of major matches, but I don't get to go out and train twice a week at this
yep.
point.
Yep.
So I just don't believe that the process should be build guns in that scenario, because I don't think that's how 90% of 85% of shooters. 85 is the number you'll hear me say. I'm always trying to build a gun that works for 85% of shooters.
Yeah.
I don't care about the guy with 120 pounds of grip pressure in each hand, and I don't care about building like a set model for a little kid. I built 9mm for 6-7 year olds that we got to do a lot of special stuff to get the gun to cycle. But again, the set model doesn't need to do that for those guys. Those guys need something special.
That's right. No, I got it. So I just really quickly while we're here, I've heard you talk about this quite a bit, and I've always looked at it like especially with a pistol, that I'm looking for like this flat shooting gun. right? And I'm
Yeah.
not saying that you're discounting that, but what I'm pointing to is you talk about it more like you're less concerned about the recoil impulse, not less concerned, but equally concerned with the return to zero.
Right. So I think we call it absolute zero or something in our lingo, but
Yeah.
I only care that the gun returns to zero.
Okay. So you're even stronger than I thought you were about it. Okay. So tell me, like, what's your
I don't
philosophy?
care. Yeah, I mean, the joke is I don't care if it does a hoop-de-hoop and comes back to zero, right?
Okay.
And it's not, it probably couldn't do that and without distracting you, so that might not work. But
yeah,
the concept is simply, well, and what we're getting away from is exactly what you'd said earlier. The flat thing is such a, it doesn't make sense, right? People say that, I get irritated, and I'm like, so if it's really flat, but at the end of the day, so it barely lifts, right? It looks flat. Whether it is or it's not, too, the videos and pictures are all really deceiving. Like, you see all these guys do the video from the lower side, and it's like, all right, that's not giving you the right angle. You have no idea how much recoil that gun really has. But the thought process is that the gun's flat and I'll be able to shoot it faster, and it's totally a broken thought process. It's just terrible. Because the gun could be really flat. I mean, we could have a flat gun that lifts, I'm making up numbers, but lifts 2 inches, but only returns 1.25 inches. So now the gun's 3/4 inches high from where it left every single time you shoot it. And so my thought process, what we're always trying to do, is I want the gun, wherever bullet impact one is, I want to be able to pull the trigger, with that gun inside of 7 to 10 yards, just absolute, close your eyes, pull the trigger twice. I want the second bullet to be pretty close to that bullet.
Yeah, I got it.
And so that's what we talk about with absolute zero. I want the gun to return. And there's typically guns do one of two things. They either return high, or they return low. And when they return low, what is a little more dangerous in that the gun will close with an iron-sighted gun. Or a dot. You'll have a sight picture. Your brain will say, "Good sight picture," and the gun still has forward momentum. So by the time you get to executing a trigger pull and the bullet getting out the barrel, now the bullet's low. Usually it's low left, but you see that a lot, and that's just a gun that's not timed well. And the timing of the guns is simply physics, right? So your grip pressure, your power factor, and your load, and there's no cheater powders or whatever. The power factor is typically the power factor, and then your recoil spring are all tunable. And then the physics of the gun is the base that we can't change that once the gun exists. Typically, we're going to try to build to the right physics out the gate.
Yep.
And so the physics of the gun end up being, well, what's the reciprocating mass weight, the slide weight, and where is the weight in the slide? So that's where you get, like, when we cut the slides back to 4.6 inches, we cut about 3/4 of an ounce off when you cut the front of the slide off. But it takes all that off the very front tipping. That's, if we're looking at that like a lever, that is the furthest most point. So now I've moved the center of balance back. So I've changed the entire timing of the gun from a balance point on recoil. And so, and then the frame weight and the grip weight and the material, how much will the plastic grips, which we don't particularly like, partly because they flex. An aluminum grip and a plastic grip are within 1 ounce of each other of weight. And I've seen you go shoot them back to back and the aluminum grips destroy the plastic grips. And partly because the plastic grips are flexing. Can I prove that in court? Probably not, but they are. There's flex in there. That's pretty much the answer to that. And so that's why you're seeing everyone trend away from the plastic grips. So again, but it's a formula. So I don't care how we get to the answer. I don't care what parts we use, aluminum grips, steel grips, whatever. It just matters to me that we get the right answer. And so with the new gun, like the Hyperion gun and the Erebus gun for 3-gun, partly what people need to know there is that you should approach a 9mm minor gun completely different than you do a major power factor gun.
Yeah.
Like the slide speed and the energy is so much less, to the tune of, 30 to 25% less, or 30 to 20, depending on how we're doing it from a pressure standpoint, which is what gets the slide speed, which is that momentum that we have to bleed off, by either counterweighting the front or the back of the gun. So when we're doing that, the thought process is to me is as simple as let's just get the gun to return to zero. So when you see the 9mm minor guns, they have a whole different approach. We're back at the 4.6 number again with the Hyperion and the Erebus.
Yep.
The Erebus is going to have a comp and a sight on the slide, an electric sight on the slide, and then the Hyperion's the limited version. But what we find again is the guns time better at 4.6 inches. They cycle better, they feed better, they return to zero better. Everything's better. Now, in disclosure, we haven't done every single, hundredth of an inch from 4.25 up to the 5.0, but somewhere in there's a perfect number, and 4.6 seems to be really, really good. So you might see us in a year or two come out with a 4.7 or something while we sit here and do the R&D on that stuff. But anyway, the equation's different. So the 9mm minor gun is going to be just completely different, and you shouldn't approach it from the same way. So for 40 cal guns, steel grips with a block to counterbalance it is the best equation. Like, no question that Nemesis is the best limited gun on the planet. No question. JJ just won nationals with it. That was a gun that a customer, but he borrowed a customer's gun. Like, somebody paid full retail for that gun. I mean, I didn't give him a gun to go do it with. Not to say that we wouldn't have worked something out, but he wanted to shoot that gun because it's awesome. And then all the engineering around that at 40 cal, that was designed around 40, around major power factor, make that gun return to zero. When we cut that same equation for 9mm, and the Hyperion's focused on 3-gun, but partly too because for 3-gun, it's really hard to run around with a 50-ounce gun on your hip.
Yep. Right?
Before it's loaded. And we got to climb over stuff and who knows what with 3-gun. So it's a different game. And the thought process there is we don't need all that weight for the 9mm. So let's build a 35-ounce gun with an aluminum grip. And then how do we get that equation to work? And the 5-inch guns with aluminum grip shoot nice, but the 4.6 guns shoot phenomenally better. And so the same thing, I get to shoot all the guns, right? And one day I'm shooting a 5-inch gun, a Titan 5-inch gun, steel grip 9mm, and I'm like, this returns nice. I can shoot this pretty fast. And then I'm shooting a 4.25-inch Commander gun in 9mm, and I'm like, with an aluminum grip, and I'm like, I can shoot this just as fast, maybe faster. Like just shots on target, trying to shoot a pretty tight group at 10 yards at full pace.
Yeah.
And so that's where the wheels start turning and going, there's something between these two. These aren't the right answers. They're good answers. These are good guns. They work. They can be shot fast and well. But from a physics standpoint, there's something in between. So a year, 2 years later, however long it takes us to do all the R&D and really hammer it in, we get the Hyperion and the Erebus, and we've got this, 4.6-inch guns with aluminum grips and a medium firm grip pressure on that gun, and literally at 10 yards you pull the trigger twice, and those bullets are within an inch, 2 inches on the outside of each other.
Yeah, I just cut it. Well, actually, it would have dropped last night. Well, no, sorry. This when this airs, it'll have dropped about 2 weeks ago. But I saw the video that you did of the testing of that. It was a raw gun, I think, right? The Hyperion. Yeah, it was. And you were out there just doing pulling the trigger twice, eyes closed, and sure as shit, you had a group size like all A, maybe like 1 or 2 slopping into the C zone of 10 shots at 7 to 10 yards, and it's like right there. And I mean, like again, here's the deal. Like, I'm sold on the heavy gun because weight is one way to manage recoil, right? And but I'm obviously very curious about what that'd be like, because look, I mean, if you could take 20 ounces out of your loadout.
Yeah, 15 maybe
ounces.
15 to 18 probably is the range, depending on how your other guns set up.
Yeah, with a in a place that's kind of remarkably, like, I mean, it's the hinge of your hip, right? I mean, I'm experimenting with different, holster hangers right now, and like finding that sweet spot where, like 50 ounces riding on your hip bone.
Well, and I think it comes down on 3-gun to DQs or lost time, right? So you're
Right.
running, your belt starts to come off, and
Yep.
what are we going to burn? 10 seconds there, or 5 seconds? Or you're running and you're hopping over something, and that gun comes out, and that's the
Yep.
end of your day.
Yeah, well, and that's
So,
where you got into the slide ride 3-gun open class pistol. Yeah, I mean that's
right, and again, that's conversations with the team guys, and they're Josh Froelich and I had a recent conversation, and he's like, yeah, I need to run with confidence, and it's really hard to do when you've got a full tilt open pistol in your, and the full tilt open guns like the Chaos, they're designed for USPSA. So in USPSA, the buzzer goes off. We take a super heavy gun at the moment out of our, that's what's hot, out of our holster, and we run around with it.
Yep.
So I don't care how heavy it is. I'm never running with it in the holster.
That's right.
For the most part. I mean, one stage a year, maybe you're going to see somebody where it makes sense to run somewhere and load a gun or something. But
right. Yeah.
So 3-gun's the complete opposite of that.
Yep.
So it's different guns. They should be different guns. And USPSA is the dominant, much bigger, much older sport. And so a lot of people have just retroed stuff. And when we came at this, my mindset was, what are the problems, right?
Yep.
And the huge difference between those two sports is running with the gun in the holster, loaded. And I mean, we did it this year. And the other part I think you look at with 3-gun is that, and I did it this year at a match. This is probably the beginning of me really pushing hard to get these things going. But we had a 3-gun match in New Hampshire, and I took an extra couple seconds to do a stage differently and ditch a pistol, so I didn't have to run from one bay to another bay with a pistol on my hip.
Yeah.
And at the end, one of the guys I shoot with down there got me on that stage, and I paid attention I knew we'd be close, so I was watching his score, and he didn't do what I did. He didn't take the insurance. And in that case, I wish I had done it. I wish I had risked it, right? And maybe my belt would have come off, and it would have cost me 10 seconds. But I just didn't know what to do there. So you shouldn't have to really make that decision with your gear, right? You should go there from a racing standpoint and say, I'm going to shoot this whatever makes the most sense to get the shortest time, and the gear shouldn't have to hold you back.
Yeah. Well, last 2 years ago, I switched to the ratchet belt system from Safariland. And then this year, I'm using the carb system. So the outer belt is actually a solid piece of Kydex or plastic.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it's ratcheted shut. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like, the USPSA belt is fine. And I keep them with me for guys who need to borrow gear. It's not like it's a problem, especially at like a local match. But man, if you're going to fast rope out of like a second story tobacco barn, after climbing a wall and blah, blah, all the different stuff you had to do in that particular instance of the Blue Ridge. There's like that, the USPSA basic belt style isn't always sufficient for that. It's just you have to do a relook, and the cops know, how to get in and out of a car at full speed with all their equipment, not have it come off. And so that's the ELS system, right? Or the ELS belt. And then you add the ratchet to that. And frankly, it's almost like it's kind of a pain in the ass to get out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but even then, when I say belt come off or whatever, and I'm talking about weight, just the wear and tear on your holster if I can cut the weight in a third,
totally,
what are the chances your holster breaks one day, or 2 weeks, less quickly.
Could be.
That's the whole thought, is that we don't need the weight. So how do we get around building a gun to that market? And so we did, and those guns are awesome. In fact, somebody called yesterday and needed a super deal on a 9, or he was going to buy a 9mm gun that somebody claimed that we didn't make, but they claimed we tuned it in the last year, and we haven't done that service in probably almost 2. And we call here, and he's like, "Hey, did you tune this gun?" And I'm like, "No, I've never tuned that model ever." So definitely, I didn't tune that gun. And we got to talking, and he's got a low budget, but I'm like, hey, I got the gun that I shot 3-gun with last year. I'll hook you up just to get you in a gun, a good gun, because I'm going to shoot the 4.6 gun. Like, I'm not going to shoot a 5-inch steel grip gun next year. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I get it.
And normally I'm shooting whatever rat trap guns are laying around here, prototype, whatever. But it's that much better that you'll see me shoot one of those.
Yeah, I look forward to checking it out more. I mean, I saw it at the Black Friday day at Arms and Arms. It's remarkably lighter, that's for sure, and it looks fantastic. All right, so then the other one I wanted to just touch on before we kind of get off the guns is the Nix. So you showed up at Arms and Arms on Black Friday with, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 prototypes of this 4-inch aluminum grip carry pistol. How did you get into that? Like, where did that come from? Like, because obviously that's not, we're starting to see, SDI, who's, arguably they're making the most guns in this platform, I would say, yearly, right?
Absolutely.
And they have been putting out a carry model for a few years with sort of limited results. It seems to be sort of taking off in the last maybe year or so, right? We're starting to see guys that are like, yeah, I'll carry that, right? I mean, there are guys like me that are like, that's the platform I have the most time on. I trust it. I know it's reliable. It's super fast. I can be very accurate with it. But what was the thing that had you take that leap? That's totally out of your lane.
Yeah, no, it's probably there's probably a bunch of different pressures that push us in that direction, but the big one is that the phone rings and people ask for that. I mean, we've had that from day one. Folks are like, oh, I want to carry one of these. And a lot of the guys who can afford to buy 3 or 4 of these guns, or 5 or 10 or whatever, can afford to carry one, right? We can't all afford to carry a $5,000 gun in our waistband, but there's been demand for that right from the beginning, and so we built some for folks, and they've always come out well, and they've always been a gun that got to leave here with the Atlas name on it because it was good enough and they worked. And what we realized was that STI is doing it a little bit for sure, like building a market for these guns, and then Wilson comes out with the EDC gun, and they're really pushing kind of that double stack market. We got a hold of a bunch of those guns and went and shot them head to head against one of our guns and our 4-inch gun, and we destroyed. I mean, it wasn't even the same league on recoil impulse, return to zero, ability to get a good trigger in there. So that kind of opened the door. And we're behind some of these. Wilson's a massive company, STI is a big company. We're behind those guys by a long way. So when they go out and open those doors, it gives tons of opportunity for us. Tons and tons and tons. And so anyway, it's been in development for a while. It's taken a while to get the kind of the design side. So the short answer is we've been doing this for customers who ask. We just haven't brought the set model to the marketplace. And now we've got a design we like, and we've got a platform we like. And again, the aluminum grips became available, and the newer version doesn't have the operating grip safety, which is a feature most folks end up disabling. So what you learn when you do this business for any period of time is that hands are like fingerprints. Everybody's is unique. And there are a lot of hand sizes that do not lend themselves well to those grip safeties.
Oh, I've got 2 of them. So I own a pair of them.
So conveniently, the newest stuff doesn't have the grip safeties, and honestly, the grip safety design in the 1911 is not an awesome. It blocks the trigger bar, but it doesn't work all that well, and a lot of times there's a lot of failures there. So just eliminating that makes a lot of sense. Well, you saw Wilson do it with the EDC. They didn't. They just put a fixed beaver tail in there. And so that kind of opened the door to people's minds to just know grip safety, and then you really get a slick unit with the Nix, where you kind of get everything you need and nothing you don't. The weight's really good. We're doing them both in aluminum frames and steel frames. So the thought process there is, if you're a shooter, if you want to shoot this thing in IDPA and you want to carry it, get the steel frame. Steel frame's going to be a little softer recoil and last a long time.
Yeah.
As long as any of our other guns. The
Yep.
aluminum frames are going to have a shorter life. We've yet to break one, but we've got some pretty serious round counts on some of them. But the recoil impulse is a little more, I call it flexy. It feels kind of like the whole thing's kind of flexing a little bit.
Yeah.
Totally shootable, and still better than almost anything else out there. But
does it have like a sense of like stress on the frame, or is it just like because I've shot, you shoot like a Glock in a 40, it's like you can almost sense the like stress on it, right? Because the gun's designed for 9, right? And it just works best in that platform. And like, and there are some gun frames that like handle that stress better than others. I guess I'm just asking a weird question, but it's.
Yeah, no, it doesn't feel like the plastic. It doesn't feel anything like the Glocks when you overpressure them, or even the Glocks when you shoot the 9s have kind of a weird delayed, kind of snappy recoil. It doesn't.
Yeah.
I flex is what.
Okay.
It feels like to me. It feels like in my hand that frame is bowing a little bit. It has a little flex to it. And it might be.
Okay.
Aluminum's a weird metal in that respect, but
it is. Yeah.
You're going to have a reduced life with the aluminum frames, and there's no bringing the aluminum back.
Yeah.
So when the frame's worn out, you're going to build a new bottom end for that rig.
Okay.
But if you're going to
carry it, yeah.
Yeah, and you're still talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds, like lots and lots of shooting. Don't plan on one of those going 100K is what I would say.
No, I got that.
Steel frames go 100 all day.
Look, I mean, I like my Walter PPS M2, which is like my go-to every day. I'll never shoot that thing out, and it's not designed to go 100K by any stretch of the imagination. I shoot it once a month. I put some reps in, as Froelich would say, or Freilich would say, and and then I put it away. Every 18 months, I burn out all my defensive ammo for it and then replace it. That's that gun's life cycle. I mean, that thing will be alive for decades.
Same thing here.
Yeah.
If that's how you're going to treat them, and we have some guys who are using them really hard and running them to the edge, and at some point we'll have a better idea how long those. But anyway, there's I don't know. I'm making up the numbers off the top of my head here, but there's a 7-8 ounce difference in weight.
Yeah,
might be 6, 7, 8 ounce, but it's substantial. So you can get a double stack gun, no mag in it, down to 26 ounces.
That's great.
Really
great.
Which way more firepower, way more controllable than like a Glock in that comparable size. Way better trigger. I mean, a better gun.
Yeah.
In every respect. And the other part that you saw, the delay in us doing this, or releasing these, or really coming to market and saying, hey, look at, we're going to do this, was the mags.
Yeah.
So the mags have been just a nightmare on the carry guns because everybody wants them to lock back. And the way that we figured out to make all these work for the competition guns is to delete the lockback feature. That's in a 4-part process to make the mags work. Delete the lockback feature works, helps a lot. So the issue with that has been solved, and I think we talked about this when we were at Arnzen when we went live there. I'll probably talk about this for the next 4 years, so people really start to know that it exists. But STI's come out with a new follower for their mags, and it's wide at the base of this tall follower, and so it keeps it from chucking left and right in the gun. And what that does is when it hits the mag catch, it essentially holds the follower in the same place every time. So you get a pretty consistent mag lock back from that. And we were having really great success with those. They were working. And then what we were seeing is that and that follower's only been out since summer of 18. And then what we were seeing, 2-3 months after the gun's been in service, that the mag, that it's not working because the springs aren't up to snuff. The springs are failing quick. So we went out and had springs for that follower custom made, and now we have a 10% plus spring or 15% plus spring for those.
Yeah,
and that combination's been bulletproof.
Cool.
In all the testing. So we've got the solution figured out on the lockback. The mags work well. They feed well. With a little bit of tuning, those new STI mags are pretty spot on and consistent.
Yep. They've been good. I've been really good this year. All right. So what's next, man? What are you up to? What can we see? Where are we going to see in 19?
19 will be interesting. The cool stuff from us in 19 will probably come late.
Okay.
I think we're on a cycle of roll out stuff for year end, like we're doing this year.
Okay.
And then bring it to market, get all that spooled up, Q1 and half of Q2, and then you'll see us in the summer start doing some R&D and design stuff, pushing for the fall, what's coming in the new stuff for the fall. But there's some of what we do is driven by the marketplace, so there's always looming rule changes in any of these sports.
Yeah.
We would do something quickly if there was a market change. I don't anticipate one. If anybody's worried that I know something that they don't, I don't. No one gives me any advance warning on that stuff. But we're always prepared for that. And then I spend a fair amount of my day working on increasing production to meet demand. So our monthly demand grows, pretty steadily, and we're trying to increase monthly production. So I'm probably sort of close if I make up the numbers, but we'll make about 400 guns this year. I hope to do a little more than 600 next year.
Yeah.
And then the big push for us that you'll see phase in here is we'll start to build out the website for parts.
Yeah.
So the struggle that we've endured and we talked about this in the early part of the conversation, but the struggle that we had with parts, hopefully we can alleviate that for some other folks in the industry. So we're a ways away from this, but the ultimate goal is that if somebody was a gun builder or a home person who wanted to do their own rig, that they could buy an Atlas build kit with all the parts, and the parts are appropriately sized to each other. So for example, firing pin stops. The channel cut in your slide will determine what kind of firing pin stop and what size it should be. The tunnel length in your for your extractor in your slide will determine what kind of extractor you should probably use. So there's all these nuances that no one knows in this industry, and even some of the gunsmiths don't seem to understand this. So if we can put a kit together where all of that stuff is already it's all fit. It's not fit. We're not hand fitting all the parts together, but they're really close because we designed them all to work together. Then we could reduce other folks' build times, and then just the headache. I mean, if you're a small builder building 50 guns a year, you probably spend a fair amount of time on the phone chasing parts.
Totally.
That are hard to get or hard to find, and that just if you could build 2 more guns a year instead of chasing parts by buying the kits from us.
Yeah.
Or something to that effect. And again, that's probably a couple years away, but you'll see us pretty quickly here. We've got some folks in Texas making us really, really nice slides, all billet slides. So you'll see us start to pair that with spring steel extractors that we're going to come to market with a really nice extractor, because no one seems to. I would buy them, but there's no one to buy them from. Nobody makes them quite the way they should. So again, it'll be pairings of things that are all fit together.
That's great.
That's kind of the theme, but a lot of parts coming from Atlas in 2019. That's probably the biggest theme.
Yeah, totally. Really cool. All right. So just a quick pivot before we wrap all this up. Like, part of what we're about here and this podcast and the complete thing is like, it's the business, it's the marketing, it's all that. And you've laid out some amazing stuff for people, but like, how do you take care of yourself in all of this? Like, what are you up to in your life that's just keeping, look, this is a lot, there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts. Like what routines do you have that you just, your go-tos to kind of keep the atom alive and moving? And
we're just getting out of the phase. So I probably couldn't have answered that question well.
Yeah.
A year or 2 years ago for sure.
Totally.
Because it was literally working 15-hour days, 6-7 days a week.
Yeah.
But we're past that. So my life is super good. So my biggest stress relief, most fun thing is shooting matches. And but I'm a performance guy, right? So what's been missing, and this will be the first year I think where it really happens. I said it was going to happen last year, and Atlas just wasn't quite to a spot where I could do it. But this should be the year where I really get to train a bunch. Okay. So I shot a lot of major matches, shot a lot of 3-gun, shot a lot of pistol last year. all over the country, but I didn't get to practice. So the focus, and I started this, so I started a gym routine, actually working out with a personal trainer, just focused on shooting. So twitch speed, foot speed, stuff like that, and core strength. I started that last year, so I started that in March. So coming into March, I'll be a year into that, but I didn't get to actually get out on the range. So the being physically fit part really helped a lot with the shooting, but the not, I'd go to matches and kill it for 2 or 3 stages, and then have one stage where you just totally biff, because if you're not out there practicing, you don't get that feedback. It's
totally. The wheels are going to fall off if you're not practicing. That's just how it is.
Right.
Yep.
And still I still had some really good fin. I had top 10 at Area 7, which is always the match I want to do the best at. But so this year will be the practice year. Scheduled time, absolute, practice is the thing. So my world's always in the shooting world. This is what I do for fun. But it should be the best, most exciting year, in the sense that I had those years. Before we started Atlas, I had a pretty regular, 3-4 hour training session at least once a week with my training partner.
Yep.
And so now I get to do it for work as far as travel goes on shooting the major matches, but I should have that at least once a week, good solid practice in.
Really great.
And then you'll see James and I dabble just a little bit, maybe more if he gets his way, but you'll see us shoot a little bit of PRS stuff.
Cool.
That's we went out and shot with Brian Whalen and Brian runs Colorado Precision Rifle.
Yeah.
And we shot at the Blue Steel Ranch with Brian. That was super fun, super interesting. And I recommend Brian to anybody who gets a chance to go out and do that kind of stuff.
We have
really
some video on that coming out. It either will have come out or it is coming out very shortly around the time this airs.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So
yep. I mean, it's all shooting, right? I like all of it. There's not, you could probably, if, God forbid they ban all the sports that we're doing now, you'd probably still talk me into going and shooting shotgun, going and shooting trap matches or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
It's not my primary, but I love all of this stuff. So, so that's what 19 will be, and it should be pretty fun.
That's really great. So last question, and then we'll wrap this sucker up. So I just if you could, just to leave people with something if you're a small business owner, right? So that's your avatar for this, right? And maybe you got a successful widget and you or a great idea. Really what I'm saying is if you could go back and tell, you're just starting out the Atlas Gunworks Adam, you could give him one piece of advice, what would you leave him with?
Focus on doing one thing well. So I would come out with the Titan sooner. Model sooner. I don't know that anybody who's talked to me on the phone or in person knows that I'm a sales guy, so I always want the sale, and a lot of times I say yes to something I probably shouldn't. But I think if we were going to do this, from a success standpoint, it would have been better if we had just come out with a set model right out the gate and just been here it is. And we weren't really structured for that.
Yeah.
But knowing what I know now, we just would have started making Titans, and that's it. There they are. Have a nice day. They're and build them the same way, but not get sucked into the custom world. And then where we're positioned now, you'll always I think I can't imagine a world where you can't get a custom Atlas gun, but my mindset is race first. So why would I buy a custom? I don't care what color it is, and I don't care what the slide cuts look like. We often build a custom gun that's not as good as the set model because the slide's too heavy or too light because they want it to look a certain way. So, I would just, if you find that niche of what you do well, do that and just try to repeat.
Really great.
Over and over.
Yeah, double and triple down on what works.
Before you kick me off, I got to do one quick shout out to the girl who keeps everything moving at Atlas Gunworks.
Yeah, for sure.
Kat is our office manager. If you haven't had the pleasure to talk to her, if she's in charge of just about everything under the sun here. So without Kat, we'd be in trouble.
Yeah,
and she keeps
sure.
I would pull more hair out, Dan. And if you've met me, I don't have a lot of hair.
Yeah.
But I'd be trying to pull it out if she wasn't just crushing it here every day.
Yeah, and you know what's been really fun about her too is like when Adam Nilson is synonymous with Atlas Gunworks, and we know there's a lot more people involved, right? But you are the public face of the company, right? And from my standpoint, from the marketing standpoint, there's always a tricky moment with a company of your size where if you are built around a public face, can you have anybody else do it, right? Will it ever work? And she has just like stepped up in a way around the marketing and being on the channel and all that kind of stuff that is kind of remarkable. Like, I don't know if anybody else could do it as well as she has. She's been amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's all of that's totally true.
Yep.
And then the part that you don't even get to see is that, I mean, her knowledge of these guns is insane.
Yeah, she owns the business, bro.
Haven't done the paperwork yet.
No, we haven't done the paperwork. No, but she owns it, meaning like, it's hard. I mean, I've hired a lot of people in my life, and there are very few hires that take ownership in a company as an employee, and they're the ones that you just don't ever want to lose.
Yeah. No,
and I would say she's that person for sure.
Yeah, we're psyched. Her future here is super bright.
Yeah, really great. Really, really cool. Well, thank you, Kat, for all the help. Big shout out from my side as well. Yeah, right on. All right, Adam, thank you so much for taking the time and just laying this all out. And it's been remarkable to hear that you filled in some gaps for me as well that I didn't know, and I'm really grateful for that. So best of luck in 19. I look forward to working on it with you.
Yeah, it was super fun. We'll see you guys all on the range soon.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. We've got lots of good stuff coming up. If you got value out of this, go ahead and do us a favor and pop over and review the show at iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. And positive reviews are really great. And then the other thing you can do to help us out is just share this with a friend. Thank you so much. See you next time. All right. Thank you.